Alicia Monroe stood proudly at the edge of the first-class cabin on Aurora Flight 512 from New York to Paris, her sharp eyes scanning each passenger. As a veteran flight attendant with over a decade of experience, she was more than just a service provider. She was the gatekeeper of the VIP experience on board. With Aurora Airlines' reputation as the pinnacle of luxury air travel, Alicia regarded the first-class cabin as her kingdom, where only the truly deserving could indulge in absolute opulence. That evening, Flight 512 wasn't just another routine journey. It was a special trial run. The company was planning to introduce an ultra-luxury service for its most elite clientele, and management wanted to assess the performance of the cabin crew before rolling it out across the fleet. Alicia knew all eyes were on her, and this was her moment to prove she was worthy of a promotion to first-class supervisor. Passengers began boarding, one by one. Alicia easily recognized the wealthy business executives, Hollywood stars, and financial moguls. They were familiar to her, not because they remembered her, but because she made a point to remember anyone who truly held influence. Everything was running smoothly until she spotted a young couple stepping into first class, Nathan and Evelyn Carter. Nathan wore a simple navy blue suit, but the tailoring was impeccable, so precise that it didn't need a visible designer label to scream luxury. Evelyn draped a beige silk coat over her shoulders, her face exuding elegance without the slightest attempt to seek attention. They wore no extravagant jewelry, displayed no overt signs of wealth like the other passengers, yet there was an unmistakable quiet confidence about them. Alicia immediately sensed something was off. A part of her refused to believe that these two could afford the first-class Imperial, a section reserved exclusively for billionaires and Aurora's most valued clientele. She stole a quick glance at Melissa, a younger flight attendant standing nearby, then leaned in slightly and murmured under her breath, "They don't look like first-class material, do they?" Melissa hesitated for a moment but said nothing. Alicia smiled, then stepped forward as the Carters handed over their boarding passes. "Good evening. May I check your tickets once again?" she asked, her voice polite yet subtly authoritative. Nathan met her gaze briefly, a sharp flicker of awareness flashing in his eyes. Evelyn offered a gracious smile, but it was evident she had noticed Alicia's tone was different from how she had addressed previous passengers. "Is there a problem?" Nathan asked, his voice calm. Alicia deliberately hesitated, scrutinizing their electronic tickets as if verifying something unusual. Even though the system confirmed their legitimacy, she pretended to mull it over. After a few seconds, she offered a faint smirk and said, "Just a routine check. Thank you for your patience." Instead of directing them to the premium center seats, the most spacious and prestigious in first class, she led them to the very last row, near the restrooms. It was the least desirable section, far from the true privileges of first class. Nathan and Evelyn exchanged a quick glance but didn't protest. They simply followed her instructions and took their seats. A quiet sense of satisfaction flickered within Alicia. She told herself she was right. Something about them wasn't quite right, and she needed to maintain control. From across the cabin, Alexander Grayson, a distinguished silver-haired gentleman, sipped his whiskey. He had observed the entire exchange, his eyes reflecting a mix of amusement and contemplation. Alicia had no idea that every move she made on this flight would soon be brought to light, and that the people she had just tried to undermine were far from ordinary. Nathan and Evelyn Carter took their seats in the last row of the first-class cabin, near the restroom, a placement Alicia had deliberately arranged to send a clear message: they didn't belong here. Evelyn gently adjusted her seatbelt and that of her child, while Nathan casually observed his surroundings. No objections, no complaints, yet their eyes held an eerie calmness. Alicia returned to the service area, her gaze flickering to the passenger manifest displayed on the screen. Everything confirmed that they were legitimate first-class passengers, yet a vague sense of doubt lingered in her mind. How did they afford first class? She knew every regular, billionaires, CEOs, celebrities, but the name Carter was unfamiliar. "Melissa, did you notice anything odd about those two?" Alicia whispered as they stood by the beverage station. Melissa, still unsettled by how Alicia had treated the Carters, replied cautiously, "They seem very polite, not causing any trouble. If their tickets are valid, what's the issue? Alicia scoffed, shrugging. It's just, I've seen too many people trying to sneak their way into first class. Sometimes they look trustworthy, but in reality, they're just skilled at exploiting the system. Melissa said nothing, but her expression hinted at quiet disapproval. The flight took off. Around the cabin, VIP passengers were served premium wine and gourmet meals, while Nathan and Evelyn received nothing. Evelyn glanced at her watch, not rushing, but Nathan smirked slightly, as if he had been expecting this. An hour passed, and Alicia still hadn't brought them drinks or the customary hot towels, services that should have been provided as soon as the aircraft reached cruising altitude. When Evelyn finally pressed the call button, Alicia deliberately took her time approaching, maintaining a professional smile, but with a distinct coldness. "Good evening. How may I assist you?" Evelyn remained composed. "We haven't received our drinks or hot towels like the other passengers. Could I get a glass of water for my daughter?" Alicia kept her smile, but ignored the mention of the hot towel. "Oh, must have been a small oversight. I'll get that right away." But instead of retrieving the water immediately, she returned to serving other passengers, making the Carters wait another 15 minutes. When she finally brought the water, she placed the glass on the tray hastily, with none of the careful attentiveness she showed to other VIPs. Nathan picked up the glass, rotating it slowly in his hand as if evaluating it, then locked eyes with Alicia. "Thank you. I believe you forgot our hot towels." Alicia raised a brow. For a brief moment, she noticed something sharper in Nathan's gaze, far more perceptive than his quiet demeanor suggested. But she maintained her composure, merely offering a light smile. "Oh, I don't recall Mrs. Carter requesting a hot towel, but let me bring them for you." She turned back toward the service station, but intentionally stalled again, prioritizing other passengers, before finally delivering the towels 10 minutes later. This time, she placed them down carelessly, a stark contrast to the elegance she displayed with the others. Nathan said nothing, but his eyes tracked every small detail of Alicia's actions. Evelyn glanced at her husband and gave him a knowing smile, as if they were both in on some secret. Throughout all of this, one person had been quietly observing: Alexander Grayson, the distinguished middle-aged man in a tailored suit, sipping his whiskey. Alexander was no stranger to first-class travel. He had taken hundreds of flights and knew exactly what to expect from Aurora Airlines' premium service. And right now, he was witnessing an unmistakable discrepancy in how Alicia was treating certain passengers. "It seems our lovely flight attendant has taken it upon herself to decide who's worthy of her respect," Alexander murmured to the person beside him, continuing to watch. Back in the galley, Alicia stood with Melissa, still harboring quiet disdain for the Carters. "I don't understand why they're here. Something feels off about them." Melissa sighed, clearly frustrated with Alicia's fixation. "They haven't complained or disturbed anyone. Why are you so determined to push them out?" Alicia smirked, crossing her arms. "I've seen all types of people. Some may afford first class, but that doesn't mean they belong here." This time, Melissa didn't respond. She realized that Alicia had become so consumed by her own bias that she was no longer open to reason. Nathan and Evelyn continued to sit quietly, enjoying their flight as if nothing had happened. But Alicia had no idea that every action she had taken was being noted, scrutinized, and assessed in detail. And when the plane landed, she would soon realize that she had just made the biggest mistake of her career. Phần 4, cú twist, sự thật khiến Alicia sụp đổ. Khi chuyến bay Aurora 512 hạ cánh xuống sân bay Charles de Gaulle tại Paris, Alicia Monroe cảm thấy một sự căng thẳng chưa từng có trong sự nghiệp của mình. Thông thường, khi chuyến bay kết thúc, cô sẽ cảm thấy tự hào về cách mình đã kiểm soát khoang hạng nhất, nhưng lần này, mọi thứ đều sai lệch. Những hành khách VIP bắt đầu thu dọn đồ đạc, lặng lẽ rời khỏi khoang hạng nhất, nhưng bầu không khí vẫn căng như dây đàn. Không ai nói gì với Alicia, nhưng ánh mắt họ đầy ẩn ý, như thể họ đã chứng kiến một điều gì đó sai trái. Alicia cố gắng tránh giao tiếp bằng mắt với Nathan và Evelyn Carter, nhưng không thể ngăn mình liếc nhìn về phía họ. Nathan chỉ bình thản lấy áo khoác, trong khi Evelyn mỉm cười nhẹ, một nụ cười không hề có sự bực tức, nhưng lại khiến Alicia cảm thấy nghẹt thở. Vừa lúc đó, một tiếp viên khác tiến về phía Alicia, khuôn mặt có vẻ lo lắng. Alicia, cơ trưởng muốn gặp chị ngay lập tức ở buồng lái. Có vẻ như có chuyện quan trọng. Tim cô đập mạnh trong lồng ngực. Chuyện gì vậy? Chẳng phải chuyến bay đã kết thúc rồi sao? Người tiếp viên chỉ lắc đầu. Tôi không biết, nhưng có vẻ như nó liên quan đến hai vị khách cuối cùng kia. Alicia cảm thấy cả người như đông cứng lại. Cô nuốt khan, cố gắng giữ vẻ ngoài bình tĩnh, nhưng từng bước chân đi về phía buồng lái lại trở nên nặng nề một cách kỳ lạ. Khi cánh cửa phòng lái mở ra, cô nhìn thấy cơ trưởng cùng hai thành viên khác trong đội ngũ điều hành của hãng đang chờ đợi. Trái tim cô thắt lại khi nhận ra không khí trong phòng ngập tràn sự nghiêm trọng. Cơ trưởng hít một hơi sâu rồi nhìn thẳng vào cô. Alicia, chúng tôi vừa nhận được một tin nhắn từ trụ sở chính của Aurora Airlines. Alicia căng người, chờ đợi. Hành khách Nathan và Evelyn Carter, họ không phải là những hành khách bình thường. Cảm thấy một luồng hơi lạnh chạy dọc sống lưng. Họ chính là chủ sở hữu mới của Aurora Airlines. Họ vừa hoàn tất thương vụ mua lại 65% cổ phần của tập đoàn. Đây là một chuyến bay đánh giá chất lượng nội bộ và cô đã trở thành một phần của bài kiểm tra. Cô không thể thở nổi. Bầu trời sụp đổ trước mặt Alicia. Tâm trí Alicia hoàn toàn trống rỗng. Cô cảm giác như máy bay vừa lao xuống mà không có dù cứu hộ. Nathan và Evelyn Carter, chủ sở hữu mới của hãng hàng không. Cô nhìn chằm chằm vào cơ trưởng, hy vọng đây chỉ là một trò đùa tồi tệ. Nhưng ánh mắt nghiêm túc của ông ta không để lại một tia nghi ngờ nào. Cô hiểu điều này có ý nghĩa gì chứ, Alicia? Cơ trưởng nói chậm rãi. Alicia hít một hơi gấp gáp, cố gắng tìm lời bào chữa. Tôi không biết. Nếu tôi biết họ là chủ sở hữu, tôi sẽ không... Cơ trưởng nghiêm mặt, cắt ngang lời cô. Vậy nếu họ không phải là chủ sở hữu, thì cô nghĩ cách đối xử của mình là chấp nhận được sao? Câu nói đó đánh mạnh vào lồng ngực Alicia, khiến cô mất đi toàn bộ lý lẽ để phản biện. Không có lời biện minh nào có thể cứu cô khỏi sự thật. Cô đã cố tình phân biệt đối xử. Cô đã đánh giá họ chỉ bằng vẻ bề ngoài. Cô đã hạ thấp danh dự của hãng hàng không mà không biết rằng cô đang đối xử với chính ông chủ của mình. Mọi thứ trở nên rõ ràng một cách tàn nhẫn. Họ đã yêu cầu một cuộc gặp với cô ngay lập tức tại phòng VIP sân bay. Alicia không thể cử động. Một cuộc gặp với chính những người mà cô đã khinh thường suốt cả chuyến bay. Cô muốn từ chối, muốn bỏ chạy, nhưng cô biết rằng mình không thể. Cuộc gặp định mệnh. Chỉ vài phút sau, Alicia bước vào phòng VIP, nơi Nathan và Evelyn Carter đã ngồi sẵn trên những chiếc ghế bọc da sang trọng. Cô đi chậm rãi, từng bước chân như đang bước vào phòng xét xử của chính mình. Nathan ngồi bình thản, tay đặt lên thành ghế, trong khi Evelyn chỉnh lại vòng tay. Ánh mắt cô sắc bén, nhưng không có chút tức giận nào. Không ai nói gì trong vài giây. Alicia cảm thấy như thể cả căn phòng đang nuốt chửng mình. Cuối cùng, chính Evelyn là người lên tiếng trước. Alicia Monroe, phải không? Cô gật đầu chậm rãi, cảm thấy cổ họng khô rát. Nathan chắp hai tay lại, ánh mắt nhìn thẳng vào Alicia, giọng nói vẫn điềm tĩnh nhưng đầy uy lực. Cô có biết tại sao chúng tôi gọi cô đến đây không? Alice nuốt khan, cố gắng giữ bình tĩnh. Tôi đoán là vì cách tôi đã phục vụ quý vị trên chuyến bay. Evelyn khẽ nghiêng đầu. Phục vụ. Giọng cô sắc như dao cạo. Cô có chắc đó là từ đúng để mô tả những gì đã xảy ra không? Alice cảm thấy tim mình đập loạn xạ. Tôi đã có những quyết định sai lầm. Giọng cô nhỏ dần. Nathan gật đầu, nhưng ánh mắt anh vẫn lạnh lẽo. Sai lầm có thể sửa chữa, nhưng thái độ của cô, định kiến của cô thì sao? Câu hỏi đó xé toạc mọi lớp vỏ bọc mà Alicia từng xây dựng. Cô không có câu trả lời. Evelyn thở dài, khoanh tay lại. Alicia, trong suốt chuyến bay chúng tôi không cần cô phải cúi đầu phục vụ, không cần sự ưu ái. Chúng tôi chỉ cần được đối xử công bằng như bất kỳ ai khác. Nhưng cô đã không làm vậy. Cô dừng lại một nhịp, rồi nói tiếp, giọng nói đầy ẩn ý. Chúng tôi không cần phải dạy cô một bài học. Thực tế là cô đã tự dạy mình rồi. Lời nói ấy rơi xuống căn phòng như một bản án cuối cùng. Và lúc đó, Alicia nhận ra, cô đã mất tất cả. When Aurora Flight 512 touched down at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, Alicia Monroe felt a tension unlike anything she had experienced in her career. Normally, at the end of a flight, She would feel a sense of pride in how she had managed the first-class cabin. But this time, everything felt wrong. The VIP passengers quietly gathered their belongings and exited the cabin, but the atmosphere remained taut as a wire. No one said anything to Alicia, but their looks were telling, as if they had all witnessed something undeniably wrong. Alicia tried to avoid eye contact with Nathan and Evelyn Carter, yet she couldn't stop herself from glancing their way. Nathan simply retrieved his coat, his expression unreadable, while Evelyn offered a faint smile. Not one of anger, but one that made Alicia's chest tighten. Just then, another flight attendant approached her, looking nervous. "Alicia? The captain wants to see you in the cockpit immediately. It seems important." Her heart pounded. "What? The flight is over, isn't it?" The flight attendant just shook her head. "I don't know, but it looks like it's about those last two passengers." Alicia felt her entire body go rigid. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to appear calm, but each step toward the cockpit felt strangely heavy. When the door to the flight deck opened, she saw the captain along with two senior executives from Aurora Airlines waiting for her. Her breath caught in her throat. The air in the room was thick with tension. The captain took a deep breath, then fixed his gaze on her. "Alicia, we just received a message from Aurora Airlines headquarters." Alicia stood frozen, bracing herself. "Passengers, Nathan and Evelyn Carter. They are not ordinary travelers." A chill ran down her spine. They are the new owners of Aurora Airlines. They recently finalized the acquisition of 65% of the company's shares. This was an internal quality assessment flight, and you just became a major part of their evaluation. Alicia couldn't breathe. Her mind went completely blank. It felt as if the plane had plunged into freefall without a parachute. Nathan and Evelyn Carter, the new owners of the airline? She stared at the captain, hoping this was some kind of cruel joke, but the seriousness in his eyes erased any doubt. "Do you understand what this means, Alicia?" the captain asked slowly. She sucked in a sharp breath, scrambling for an excuse. I didn't know. If I had known they were the owners, I wouldn't have." The captain's expression darkened as he cut her off. "So if they weren't the owners, you think your treatment of them was acceptable?" The words hit her like a hammer to the chest. There was no excuse that could save her from the truth. She had deliberately discriminated. She had judged them purely by appearance. She had shamed the airline's reputation without realizing she was mistreating its very owners. The reality was undeniable. "They have requested an immediate meeting with you in the airport's VIP lounge." Alicia couldn't move. A meeting? With the very people she had looked down on the entire flight? She wanted to refuse, to walk away, but she knew she couldn't. A few minutes later, Alicia stepped into the VIP lounge, where Nathan and Evelyn Carter sat in luxurious leather chairs, waiting. She walked slowly, each step feeling like she was entering her own trial. Nathan sat relaxed, his hands resting on the armrests, while Evelyn adjusted her bracelet, her gaze sharp, not with anger, but something far more unsettling. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The silence suffocated her. Finally, Evelyn broke it. "Alicia Monroe, correct?" Alicia nodded slowly, her throat dry. Nathan clasped his hands together, his eyes locking onto hers, his voice calm yet commanding. "Do you know why we asked you to come here?" Alicia swallowed, struggling to keep her composure. I assume it's about how I treated you on the flight." Evelyn tilted her head. "Treated?" Her voice was sharp as a blade. "Are you sure that's the right word to describe what happened?" Alicia felt her pulse hammering in her ears. "I made poor judgments," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan nodded, but his expression remained cold. "Judgments can be corrected, but your attitude, your bias, what about that?" That question shattered any defense she had left. She had no answer. Evelyn sighed, folding her arms. "Alicia, throughout the flight, we never expected you to bow to us or give us special treatment. We didn't need privileges. We only expected fair treatment, the same as any other passenger. But you couldn't even give us that." She paused for a moment, then delivered the final words with quiet finality. "We don't need to teach you a lesson, because the truth is, you already taught yourself one." Her words fell like a final verdict. And at that moment, Alicia realized she had lost everything The atmosphere in the VIP lounge froze after Evelyn Carter's words. Alicia Monroe sat stiffly in her chair, feeling as though every ounce of authority and control she once held had been completely stripped away. In the first-class cabin, she had been the one who set the rules, who decided who was worthy of the best service. But now, she was the one being judged, not by an ordinary passenger, but by the owners of the entire airline. Nathan Carter quietly observed her for a moment before leaning back in his chair, crossing his arms. Alicia, how long have you been working for Aurora Airlines? Alicia swallowed hard, her voice coming out softer than usual. 10 years. Evelyn tilted her head slightly, her sharp gaze free of anger or malice. She simply looked at Alicia as if she were a puzzle missing an essential piece. 10 years. That's not a short time. She paused briefly before continuing. So tell me, Alicia, what have you learned in those 10 years? The question was gentle, but it hit Alicia like a weight dropping onto her chest. What had she learned? She had learned how to maintain professionalism, how to handle difficult customers, how to create an aura of exclusivity in first class, but she had not learned how to judge people by anything other than their appearance. Alicia opened her mouth, but no words came out. Nathan continued to watch her, making no effort to rush her response, but their silence was far more piercing than any reprimand. Finally, she whispered, I was wrong. Evelyn's expression remained neutral, but a flicker of disappointment crossed her eyes. Mistakes can be corrected, Alicia, but do you actually understand why you were wrong? Alicia felt her chest tighten. This wasn't a scolding or a lecture. It was the undeniable truth that she couldn't escape. I let my bias determine how I treated passengers, Alicia admitted, her voice steadier now, though still trembling slightly. I misjudged the two of you, and I acted unprofessionally. Nathan nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. Do you believe you still deserve to work at Aurora Airlines? Alicia felt a sharp chill run down her spine. This was the question, the one that would decide her fate, and she knew the answer. No. The word came out small, but clear. Evelyn nodded slowly, as if she had already expected that response. We agree? Alicia felt her entire world collapse in that moment. Nathan reached into his coat and placed an envelope on the table in front of her. We've reported this incident to the Aurora Airlines Board of Directors. They've reviewed everything, from passenger feedback to your conduct on the flight. Alicia didn't dare open the envelope, but she already knew what was inside. You'll receive severance compensation, Nathan continued. But as of today, you are no longer employed by Aurora Airlines. Alicia's hands trembled, but she didn't argue. She had already seen this coming, but she hadn't expected it to happen this swiftly or this ruthlessly. I understand, she choked out. Evelyn studied her one last time. Remember, Alicia, not everyone gets a second chance, and not everyone can turn back once they've gone too far. Nathan said nothing more. He simply held her gaze for a long moment, as if assessing whether she truly grasped the weight of what had happened. Then, without another word, they stood and left the VIP lounge, leaving Alicia alone with the envelope on the table. She picked it up, opened it, and read the bolded words at the top of the page. Notice of termination. It was officially over. Alicia Monroe, who once believed she ruled over first class, had just been completely erased from the skies. After leaving the VIP lounge, Alicia wandered through the airport for a long time. She didn't want to leave, as if she were still clinging to the career she had built over the past 10 years. But she knew she had no future here anymore. On the way to her hotel, she turned on her phone and was immediately met with news of her downfall spreading online. Some first-class passengers had taken photos and written posts about the blatant favoritism she had displayed on the flight. Now, it was turning into a full-blown scandal in the airline industry. Veteran flight attendant fired for discriminating against airline owners without realizing their identity. The headline on social media stabbed into her mind. Alicia felt like she was sinking into a bottomless pit. She had lost everything, and there was no way to get it back. In the days that followed, Alicia Monroe ignored every call. She was blacklisted from the airline industry. No company wanted to hire a flight attendant involved in a discrimination scandal. She was lost, with no direction for her life. But the most painful part wasn't losing her job. It was realizing that she had destroyed her own career, all because of a meaningless arrogance. And now she had to face the consequences alone. Alicia Monroe sat quietly in her small New York apartment, her vacant eyes staring out the window. It had been a week since she was fired from Aurora Airlines, yet the echoes of that day clung to her like a never-ending nightmare. Her phone vibrated constantly, messages from former colleagues, reporters, and even news agencies wanting to interview her about the incident. She ignored them all. On social media, the story of the flight attendant fired for discriminating against her own boss had turned into a topic of mockery and debate. The comments were divided. Some defended Alicia, arguing that she had simply followed her instincts and didn't deserve such severe punishment. But the majority criticized her for her bias and for favoring certain passengers in a job meant to serve everyone equally. Even some of her former colleagues had silently removed her from their friends list. Alicia didn't dare leave her apartment. She had lost her job, her reputation, and the confidence she once carried so proudly. She knew she needed to find a new job, but no airline was willing to hire her. She had submitted applications to a few places, hoping that some smaller airline might give her a chance. But every time she applied, the question about why she left Aurora Airlines became an impossible obstacle. One day, she received a response from a small regional airline. Her heart leaped with hope, only to be crushed the moment she opened the email. Thank you for your interest. However, after reviewing your background and circumstances regarding your departure from your previous employer, we are unable to proceed with your application. Alicia clenched her phone tightly, fighting back the tears. Every door in the aviation industry had closed on her. That afternoon, as Alicia sat slumped over her desk, her phone suddenly rang. She didn't want to answer until she saw the name on the screen. Leah Monroe, her younger sister. They hadn't spoken in nearly 3 years. Leah was a specialist in diversity and workplace equity, but Alicia had never taken her work seriously. She used to roll her eyes whenever Leah talked about bias training and corporate inclusivity programs. But now, Alicia was living proof of what happens when bias goes unchecked. After a moment of hesitation, she answered, Alicia? Leah's voice was steady, but not cold. Hey, Leah. Alicia's voice was weak. A brief silence hung between them. Are you okay? Leah finally asked. Alicia let out a bitter laugh. I just got fired. The entire world is laughing at me, and no one wants to hire me. I'm fantastic. Leah sighed, but there was no mockery or judgment in her tone. I read about what happened, and I think you need to talk to someone. Alicia's throat tightened. Talk? For what? I've lost everything, Leah. 10 years of work, gone, all because of one stupid moment. Leah was silent for a long moment before she spoke, her voice firm but not unkind. No, Alicia, you didn't lose everything because of one moment. You lost everything because of what you refused to see for years. The words hit Alicia like a freight train. She knew Leah was right. She had refused to see herself. So what do I do now? Alicia whispered. For the first time, her voice carried both despair and hope. Leah took a slow breath. You can sit there and feel sorry for yourself. Or you can learn from this mistake and do something different. Alicia closed her eyes, letting Leah's words sink in. Maybe Leah was right. Maybe this wasn't the end, but an opportunity to start over. The next morning, Alicia opened her laptop and began searching for articles on unconscious bias and workplace discrimination. She read about how companies were evolving to be more fair and inclusive. She watched videos of people who had made mistakes like hers and how they had changed. For the first time, Alicia wasn't just someone judging from the outside. She was trying to understand, and Leah didn't leave her behind. They started talking more often, and Leah even introduced Alicia to a nonprofit organization that specialized in training professionals on diversity and workplace equity. You're not going to change overnight, Leah told her, but you can start somewhere. Alicia was terrified. She had never imagined herself working in a field like this. But at the same time, this was the only path left for her. One night, Alicia did something she never thought she would do. She wrote a letter of apology. Sitting at her desk, she picked up a pen, hesitated for a moment, and then began writing. To Nathan and Evelyn Carter, I know there's a chance you'll never read this letter, but I feel the need to write it anyway. I allowed my bias to cloud my judgment. I let arrogance make me believe I had the power to decide who deserved respect and who didn't. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm trying to change. What happened on that flight wasn't just a mistake, it was a lesson I will carry for the rest of my life. Thank you for forcing me to finally see myself. She placed the pen down, folded the letter, and took a long, steady breath. She couldn't change the past, but maybe, just maybe, she could still change the future. Time passed, and Alicia Monroe was no longer the rigid, arrogant, and judgmental woman she once was. After her phone call with her sister Leah, she embarked on a journey she had never imagined, a journey that forced her to redefine herself. She had once believed she had the power to decide who was worthy of first class. Now she was learning how to see people not for their outward appearances, but for their true value. She no longer took pride in the years she spent as a flight attendant, commanding control over her domain. Instead, she looked back at those years as a harsh but necessary lesson, one that had broken her but also taught her where she had gone wrong and what she needed to do to change. With Leah's help, Alicia landed a job at a nonprofit organization that specialized in workplace equity and diversity training. The job was not glamorous. There were no perfectly pressed uniforms, no luxurious flights, and certainly no VIP passengers showing her deference. Instead, she spent her first few months just learning and observing. She attended seminars, listening to speakers share their experiences of being judged unfairly. She heard the stories of people who had been misunderstood, overlooked, and had to fight just to be seen for who they really were. And for the first time, she felt shame, realizing that she had once been part of the problem. You can't change the past, but you can learn how to change the future. Leah had told her. Alicia was finally starting to believe it. 6 months later, Alicia was invited to attend a conference on corporate fairness and equality. At the event, a colleague suggested something unexpected. Why don't you speak about your own experience? At first, Alicia hesitated. How could she stand in front of hundreds of people and admit her mistake? How could she share the story of how she had lost everything? But then she realized one simple truth. If she truly wanted to change, she had to stop running from her past. And so, for the first time in her life, Alicia Monroe stepped onto a stage not to command, but to confess. I was a flight attendant, and I used to believe that I could look at someone and immediately know where they belonged. I judged people by their appearances, and I made a mistake I will never fully be able to correct. I lost my job. I lost my reputation. I lost my pride. But the most important thing I lost was the chance to treat people fairly. The room fell into complete silence as her words hung in the air. I'm not here to justify what I did. I'm here because I've learned that mistakes don't define us. How we face them does. When Alicia finished speaking, the room erupted in applause, not because she was a hero, but because she had faced the darkest part of herself and chosen to be better. A letter with no name. One morning, Alicia received an envelope with no return address. She opened it, immediately recognizing the familiar handwriting. Nathan and Evelyn Carter. Dear Alicia, we received your letter, and while it wasn't necessary, we wanted you to know that we read it very carefully. Not everyone is willing to recognize their mistakes, but you did, and that alone is worth acknowledging. What happened on Aurora Flight 512 was not an accident. It was a test, not just for the airline's employees, but for you. We hope that this lesson stays with you for a lifetime and that you continue the path you are on. Don't let your past trap you. Let it teach you. Alicia read the letter again and again, then smiled softly. She knew she would never return to the skies the way she once had. But she also knew she had found something better, a new path, a meaningful one. Not everyone gets a second chance, but if you do, take it. Took her chance, and she would never let go of it again. The life of Alicia Monroe is clear proof that mistakes can shape us, but they don't have to destroy us. In a single moment, she let bias and arrogance guide her, and the price she paid was losing everything she once took pride in. But what makes this story valuable isn't the fall, it's how she got back up. Perhaps, in life, we've all been guilty of judging too quickly. Perhaps we've all acted without realizing the long-term consequences of our choices. But the most important thing isn't the mistake itself, it's whether we're willing to learn from it and change. If there's one takeaway from Alicia's story, it's this: don't let bias determine how you treat others. Every mistake can be a lesson if you're willing to learn from it. Change isn't easy, but it always starts with one small decision. And finally, remember this: treating people with kindness is never the wrong choice. Have you ever made a mistake that later helped you grow as a person? Share your story in the comments below. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any of our upcoming life lessons. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.